The board is following the requirements of Assembly Bill AB 2449, which enables remote access participation by board members only under specific circumstances. Board member Camacho has informed the board that he has just cause, as that term is defined in section 54953J2 of the California Government Code, to participate remotely in this evening's meeting. Would board member Camacho like to speak at this time?
Yes, thank you. My plan was to be there, but due to extenuating circumstances, I cannot. And so I have a family care issue that I have to attend to here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I might, it appears that board member Camacho has articulated a just cause basis to participate remotely in this meeting, consistent with the terms of AB 2449, as the law specifically defines caregiving, family care needs as a just cause. I'd note that pursuant to the government code, trustees may participate remotely in meetings for just cause reasons for up to 2 meetings per calendar year. Trustees who participate remotely pursuant to AB 2449 must publicly disclose whether any other individuals who are 18 years of age or older are with them in the same room at the remote location. And I'll ask trustee Camacho to confirm one way or the other with respect to that point.
There are no individuals over the age of 18 in here with me.
Thank you, trustee Camacho. Also, trustees who participate remotely must participate through both audio and visual technology. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We use simultaneous interpretation in Spanish for those attending virtually through the end of the public comment. Translation will continue further into the meeting if people are utilizing the channel. Thank you to our interpreter, Teresa Mendeville, for joining us remotely. For meeting attendees wishing to access the Spanish translation channel on Zoom, click on the interpretation button on the menu bar. We ask that all speakers be mindful of the Spanish interpretation and speak slowly and clearly. I ask board members to speak directly into the microphone and remind all speakers who are wearing masks to remove their masks when speaking in order to be clearly heard by all attendees. Item 1B is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There is a motion to approve the agenda made by Ms. Alvaro and seconded by Mr. Cannon. Is there any further discussion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes with unanimous vote, and the agenda for tonight's meeting has been approved. Item 2 is public comment. Guidelines for public comment are available on the San Mateo County Office of Education website and in the board docs, as well as on the table outside the boardroom in both English and Spanish. If there are speakers who require Spanish interpretation, our interpreter, Ms. Mendeville, will interpret following each speaker's comments. At this time, members of the public may provide comment for topics not included on the approved agenda. The County Board of Education does not act upon any matter that has not been agendized except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. It is the policy of the county board to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. Superintendent McGee, do we have any comments submitted prior to the meeting this evening?
We do not.
Thank you. Speakers are invited to make live comment and have 3 minutes to speak. The board's executive assistant, Jennifer Perna, will keep the time and advise when the speaker has 30 seconds left. Please keep within the time limits. To make a comment over Zoom, members of the public may use the raise hand feature. Instructions for using this feature are provided as an attachment in the board packet. Once the hand is raised, please wait to be acknowledged by Superintendent McGee. Superintendent McGee, are there any members of the public attending remotely who wish to make a comment at this time?
We have one hand raised, Janice Pellizzari. Janice, you are free to talk.
Okay. Good evening, President Gerard, Board Trustee, Superintendent McGee, and guests. I'm here to start with a lot of positives. Michael, our new administrator over schools, and I know that's not his title. I know there's something more official. It was great to have you in our staff meeting today, and thank you for being so upfront and open with us when questions were asked. Jonas, thank you for being so professional and a true leader during ESY and 2 after Shirley left. Thank you, Chris, Sarah, and Tammy for being true leaders during the LMI conference in June. You were engaged and present for the whole event. Thank you, Superintendent McGee, for bringing union leaders and management together. Thank you, Manette, for talking with me at least on 3 different separate situations this summer that could have become way bigger than they did. And a personal note, Chris Stout, I saw your name on the board packet this afternoon and was very proud and a tinge of whatever. We are so lucky to have you here. Now, I need to change gears. This county office hires upper management and their salaries are much higher than mine. So I should not have to work after hours to explain contract, variable pay, and paychecks to people. Mike, contracts went out again without being checked and they were wrong, and it isn't the first time. The information about variables that was given to me this afternoon wasn't correct as well. The last person in your position at least womaned up when she made mistakes instead of blaming others for them. I have been an employee with the county office, as you all know, for 32 plus years. And when new management comes in and changes are made, we roll with it, we accept it, and we keep trying to go on. However, there has been many changes made in management and administration in the last few years that frequently information is given and passed out incorrectly and differently, depending on who you talk to. This is extremely difficult for members who are working directly with students and don't know the background of everything else. All I ask if people at the county office will work with me as a union leader and not against me. Thank you once again, Board President Gerard, Board Trustees, and Superintendent McGee for your time this evening. And Trustee Lampert, I want you to reassure you, we know who our employer is. I hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you. Members of the public may also provide live comment in person. Superintendent McGee, are there any cards submitted?
No cards.
Thank you. Public comment addressing specific agenda items will be heard immediately before the board takes them up. If members of the public wish to speak to a specific agenda item, please use the raised hand feature when the item is announced, or if in person, submit a card in advance for the item. Item 3A is the July 2023 Employee of the Month. And our Employee of the Month for July is Jane Yang, Benefits Analyst, Human Resources, Office of the Superintendent. Will Jane please join me in the middle of the room?
Here you go.
Jane, I'm going to read a few comments that your fellow workers have made about you. And so here we go. Each month, the board and superintendent recognize an employee for providing outstanding service. For the month of July, we recognize Jane Yang, benefits analyst in the Human Resources Department. Jane returned to the county office in January 2021 as benefits analyst. She had served in the Human Resources Department as benefits specialist from 2006 through 2008. Jane has done an exceptional job managing the County Office of Education's employee benefits program. Throughout her tenure, she has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to ensuring that our employees receive competitive and meaningful benefits that align with their needs. Her expertise in benefits analysis, data-driven recommendations, and compliance adherence has been instrumental in enhancing the overall employee experience. Jane's innovative ideas, problem-solving skills, and dedication have also had a direct positive impact on the success of the Human Resources Department, enabling it to achieve its goals efficiently and effectively. Jane exhibits strong leadership qualities and takes initiative in guiding and motivating others. She leads by example, consistently displaying a positive attitude, adaptability, and a willingness to take on new challenges, which inspires others to do the same. The Human Resources Department highly values Jane's contributions to the team and her efforts to create a positive working environment. Jane engages with the team members, fosters open communication, shares knowledge, and is supportive. Her colleagues across the organization also appreciate her professionalism, enthusiasm, and positive attitude. We are proud of our County Office of Education staff and are pleased to recognize Jane Yang for her outstanding work. Congratulations to Jane for being named Employee of the Month for July 2023. Jane, would you like to say a few words? And congratulations. My goodness, that's wonderful.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate this recognition. And I want to use this opportunity to thank my team and my team leaders, Tammy and Mike, and everyone here. They're so wonderful and so pleasant to work with. And also every employee that I encountered in the past 2.5 years is wonderful. So overall, I'm really grateful to this place. I really like this place. Thank you so much.
Well, Jane, benefits are tough. I know. My background is human resources, so believe me, I understand. So congratulations for doing such a fantastic job. And as a token of our appreciation, we'd like to give you a check and also an Apple Award. So congratulations and thank you again for being with us and doing such an outstanding job. You're welcome. Item 4A is there a motion to approve the minutes of the June 28th, 2023 regular board meeting as presented?
Move approval. Second.
There is a motion to approve the minutes of the June 28th, 2023 regular board meeting made by Ms. Alvaro and seconded by Ms. Bonini. Is there any further discussion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Alvaro,
Aye.
Ms. Bonini,
Aye.
Mr. Camacho,
Aye.
Mr. Cannon,
Aye.
Mr. Torres,
Aye.
Ms. Gerard.
Aye. The motion passes with unanimous vote, and the minutes of the June 28th, 2023 regular board meeting have been approved. Item 5 is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is not debatable and requires a unanimous vote for passage. An item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular order of business for separate discussion and action if any member of the board, the superintendent, or the public so requests. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is-
Second.
There is a motion to approve the consent agenda made by Ms. Alvaro and a second by Mr. Cannon. Is there any further discussion? May I please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Alvaro.
Aye.
Ms. Benini,
Aye.
Mr. Camacho,
Aye.
Mr. Cannon,
Aye.
Mr. Torres,
Aye.
Ms. Gerard.
Aye. The motion passes with unanimous vote and the consent agenda has been approved. Item 6A, Superintendent McGee will provide a report on the Gateway Learning Series. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public? I don't see any hands. Right? Okay, Superintendent McGee.
Thank you, Board President Gerard, members of the board, and all of our audience and public. I'm going to pull up the slides here in just 1 second. So I'm here tonight to report to the board about the Gateway Learning Series as we conducted that with County Office of Education, department and division leaders, San Mateo Union High School district leaders, and Sequoia Union High School district leaders to dive into conditions at Gateway, how our students are experiencing their education, how they arrive there from our districts, how they're referred, what kinds of progress and achievements they accomplish while in the program, and how they return to the districts and the kinds of success they experience there. It was an intensive series. As you can see, we met 5 times for multiple hours. We had 2 different 3-hour in-person meetings. So we got a lot of work accomplished during that time. And so these are the dates and the types of structures that we used in order to meet. We used a variety of anchor documents, some of which I've shared with you in a prior board report back in May. Another document that we have in our library for reference is this very recent document from the U.S. Department of Education. It was released in March of 2023. It's called Guiding Principles for Creating Safe, Inclusive, Fair, Supportive School Climates. And while it doesn't address specifically alternative education, this is exactly captures the goal of what we're looking to strengthen and improve and restructure in our alternative settings across our districts. So I'm going to take time to read through these bullet points just because I think this really sets the tone for the vision for the work that we're doing. In a safe, inclusive, fair, and supportive school environment, we would see a sense of belonging through positive, safe, and welcoming, inclusive school activities. Support for the social, emotional, physical, and mental health needs of all students through evidence-based strategies. Adequately supporting high-quality teaching and learning by increasing educator capacity, recruiting and retaining a diverse educator workforce, and ensuring the fair administration of student policies in ways that treat students with dignity and respect. The nice I think you have received the PowerPoint, and the title is linked to the full document. So you can take a deeper dive if you want to take a look, but there's lots of really great guidance in this document, which is coming from our federal government, which is a nice thing. So over the course of the 5 sessions, we had different goals for each meeting. Session 1 in April, we met in person. We were establishing our why. Why are we here together? The idea that we're gathering our context and we're really clarifying what our outcomes are intended to be for this particular learning series. What we really did in session 1 was share across the 3 districts what kinds of equity anchors we have inside of our LEAs, and how we see those equity drivers playing a part in the way in which we're adopting and implementing our own discipline policies, and how we're lifting up alternative education in the county. Session 2, we really talked about the idea of freedom dreaming, trying to sort of remove barriers to our brainstorming, to imagine if you could think of the most amazing, ridiculously amazing, positive school environment that was fun, engaging, challenging, and supportive for students. What would that look like? So we had 2 sessions really of freedom dreaming. In session 2, we spent a lot of time anchoring in what that means and what it is. And in session 3, which was an in-person session, we did a lot of writing on sticky notes, putting up on charts, organizing and moving our ideas around and sharing across our different districts. And we mixed our groups. So we really shared what our dreams and visions were for this, for improved settings for alternative students. Session 4, we went through all that data that we created in session 3, and we analyzed and refined it further so that by session 5, we were really ready to produce what our commitment statement would be as we moved into the full process over this next year. We did a deep dive into data around Gateway. We've looked at the historical data over time, which you've seen, the way in which the numbers have been reducing over time, the ways in which students of color, students with IEPs often are the referred students who end up in our program. And we also conducted empathy interviews with every single student attending Gateway and gathered what we call street data. And then we're in looking at the data, even though the numbers are small, and this is the data from 2021-22, it kind of bears out that about 50% of the students who attend Gateway make good progress, return back to their districts, seem to advance in their education and in their lives in the ways in which we would want them to. And about 50% of those students do not advance, either drop out, end up in our court school settings. We had 3 students in 2021-22 who completed the school year but did not graduate. And we had in that year 5 of 7 students returning to Gateway, which isn't necessarily a negative thing at all. In some cases it's positive, but 5 of those 7 who returned made progress and 2 did not. So this kind of equals out to about a little bit less than about a 60-40% guidance, and to our way of thinking, these numbers are not high enough for what we're really looking for every student. So in the course of the discussions, we really did talk a lot about how what the conditions are in each of the districts that largely use Gateway, which is Sequoia Union High School District and San Mateo, what kinds of challenges they experience in helping support their students be successful. This is kind of a random sampling of some of the things that surfaced as sort of systemic challenges that we see. Certainly, in education, we know that whatever setting you're in, you're always kind of looking upstream a bit and thinking if only they could get those kids ready in preschool, they do better in first grade, or if only the elementary school settings were doing a little bit better, than by the time the kids get to middle school, they'd be more successful. So it wasn't any different here. The high school administrators really feel like the middle schools is a vulnerable space for students. A lot happens in those years, as we all know, in the middle school ages. And in San Mateo County, I've always said this, but it's a really unique place for middle schools because we have 17 K-8 districts in this county, and most of them have one middle school. The larger districts may have two. But so you have one standalone middle school. So those districts don't really have collaborators and partners that kind of push them. They also don't have the kinds of resources that we would want to see, especially for students who aren't being successful or who are finding themselves in discipline settings. So we've explored this in the past, and I think it remains top of the list for us to dive into as we move into the design phase over this next year. There was definitely an acknowledgement that our districts need to do a better job. This is from everyone acknowledging, no one's pointing fingers at any one LEA, but we have a mindset of reacting to student behaviors and student conditions rather than being responsive to them. Responsive means that we're trying to set supports and systems up in advance of their maybe their acting out or their behavior that maybe resulted in some discipline. And oftentimes we're then following basically a punitive model where certain number of referrals, require then a suspension, then certain number of suspensions, then ultimately result in possibly moving a student to another setting, and then certain activities then may result in an expulsion. And there's not as much restorative activities in that pathway as we would like to see, as we think our students need and deserve. We know that particularly after COVID, student behaviors have been more extreme and more frequently extreme. We've seen more hate speech, more microaggressions on campuses, many more incidents with possession of firearms or serious offenses. That's all across the county. And I would go ahead and say that it's been all across the state. I don't think it's unique to San Mateo County. This was a really sort of eye-opening conversation that we dug into very deeply. And that is an understanding that in our districts, students who may be up for expulsion often have options depending on the resources of their parents. Some families are able to remove their children from a setting and put them in a private school because they have the financial resources, or do homeschooling with them, or some provide some sort of private program. So what we can assume is that the students who end up at Gateway are students coming from families who don't have those resources and that access, which makes our equity question even more precise and sharp. In looking, especially paying attention to the street data that we gathered and talking to the students, many of the students were, feeling supported by their teachers and feeling supported by the school setting, but their understanding of what they were trying to accomplish felt certainly not compatible with their abilities. A lot of students were focused on credit recovery, completing packet work, and feeling like those were their goals, as opposed to larger landscape goals of, I'm going to go on to higher education, engage in some sort of career pathway training or have some bigger vision of their life. And we did all agree across the systems that I do believe it's a system issue that we don't value the abilities of our students enough and kind of fall into a culture of low expectations that we want to attack. Again, in the data, we have about a 50% success rate at Gateway. That's not, you can find different sets of data that might be one side or the other, but looking at all the data across the years, that's kind of where we ended up. And so where the group ended up was students do attend Gateway, they catch up, they gain credits through credit recovery, and in some cases, they earn regular credits through grades that they're earning in their classrooms. But oftentimes, and the district leaders did speak to this, that students will go back, and oftentimes it doesn't take much to tip them over again, that their change is very surface level, and we aspire to, through an alternative education program, more deeply transform the trajectory that they're on, so that when they do go back to their districts, they completely engage in different kinds of positive activities, as opposed to going back to old friend groups and resuming old negative patterns. So in the timeline where we are right now, we would call what we just did phase 1 of gathering data, phase 2, phase 1 gathering data and doing the learning series. Phase 2 is right ahead of us, which will be to deeply engage in a design process across with all of our agency partners, San Mateo Union, Sequoia Union, and our other districts, to not only design potentially new models of education for alternative students that we're serving in our community school setting, but also how all of our districts can adopt best practices and potentially change the way they're serving their own students in their districts in alternative settings. And then phase 3 would be, once we complete that design process, we will continue to iterate the plan, collect data, learn more, design, communicate, and implement would be the goal. Added just a definition for what we understood as our activity under Freedom Dreaming, which is an opportunity to visualize the future that we want to live in and to harness the necessary tools and resources to actually move that dream to reality. It begins with addressing inequalities within ours and our others' lives and build awareness, and then taking steps to enact change. Just a reminder that the model at Gateway really is a 20th century model. There's so many different ways to serve students. And in the 21st century, through technology, through career pathways, through community partnerships, through collaborations. And so we really want to expand to 21st century opportunities for our students. In the process of the learning series, we heard from several specific adult allies. Nick Jasso, who is the new director of Project Change, and who actually was a student in Hillcrest, went through Project Change, graduated from the community college, and then went on to UCLA to graduate. And he is one of the youth leaders across the state that's leading juvenile justice reform. So we're very lucky to have Nick. He's very new in his role. He's excited to work with us and to reinvigorate Project Change, which really kind of suffered a little bit under COVID, obviously, and then didn't really have a specific director. So with Nick in place, he's really taking steps to reinvigorate the program. We heard from Katie Heister, who is the Executive Director of FLY, which stands for Fresh Lifelines for Youth, an organization that we partner with in our court and community schools. And then Katie Bliss, who was the original visionary for Project Change, of course, at the community college, now works for Youth Law Center and is one of the adult change makers across the state for juvenile justice reform. We also consulted, or I consulted specifically with Tony Presta and Jefferson Union High School District to learn more about how they're doing with serving their alternative students, and Dr. Shantara Moore in South San Francisco. These are two districts who do not send students to our community programs, but serve all of their students inside their districts. They have models that they've been using for years, and they say it works well. However, they're also open to ways in which they can innovate and improve the ways in which they're serving students. And then we named a number of specific community partners that we feel we can tap into, both for instructional partnerships, as well as social, emotional, and career and technical partnerships. And then we have been collecting examples of effective alternative ed models across the state and the country who have really, really amazing outcomes. So there's lots of data out there to look at and understand. This is just a visual of, all the different sticky notes and processes we were going through. We have all this data recorded in our documents. And here's a few examples of the kinds of things we all would agree on that we're aspiring to accomplish is an assets-based identity for our students, to believe in what they bring, to believe in what's possible for them, and to help them believe in it and accomplish those dreams, create a culture of high expectations, and presume competence. Another thing we all very much agreed on is that flexibility in a model is really important, that we need to think about flexible scheduling, the way in which credits are accumulated, learning modalities, different ways in which students learn. And we know that these are students for whom traditional school structures have not been successful. That is why they are at Gateway. And yet Gateway, as I said, in a 20th century model, is rather more traditional in its structure currently. And finally, we're very, very aware that the community college is just down the road, number one, and a very open and inviting partner to work with us. We believe that we can be a lot more forward thinking in how our students are engaging between the Gateway campus and the community college campus. They really literally are next door to each other. And with Project Change anchored at the community college there at CSM, there's a lot of exciting ideas that we expressed and discussed. So our final meeting, we crafted this statement. It's long, and we had a shorter one to consider, but in the end, we wanted to go with this one because we wanted to capture every single thing that we're trying to accomplish here. So I'm going to read this. We came out of this learning series with a shared commitment. The leaders of the San Mateo County Office of Education, the San Mateo Union High School District, and the Sequoia Union High School District are committed to the design of a highly engaging educational learning space that honors students' assets, is student-centered, and engages in strategic partnerships to provide individualized support to any student needing or seeking a flexible educational experience. We are committed to providing options for multiple pathways and removing all barriers to address students' individual social, emotional, behavioral, and academic needs and interests. We will support students' aspirations and dreams, and students will leave the program as empowered lifelong learners, understanding their unlimited potential, committed to making their community and the world a better, more just society. Our next steps are to absolutely focus on this next school year at Gateway. We want to lift up a successful start and implementation of a full school year at Gateway that is positive and engaging. The planning group from the learning series is exploring various expert facilitators who can work with us in the design process. We do not intend to do this alone or by ourselves. We have a meeting tomorrow with the National Equity Project, and we have several other organizations on the docket to have conversations with. Once we've decided on our partner in that work, we will work to shape a process and then begin to implement that. And when that implementation happens, that will be probably a year-long experience, or maybe 9 months long, where we will engage all stakeholders and really get to work. That concludes my slides, but before I end, I do want to add that under the leadership of Chris Schaus, our Associate Superintendent of Ed Services, I think you're very well aware that she led all of our school programs in a meaningful strategic planning process that is being integrated into the complete strategic plan and will be a focus at our August 8th launch. Part of the work that the Court and Community School staff did, they identified several levers that they want to move forward in their court and community school settings right now. And those levers, especially in the career and technical ed and workforce experiences, is right in line with the design of the bigger group. So we're excited to, they have the green light to go forward in implementing that plan and the support of all of us here at the county office to do that. Today, we mailed out a letter that I personally wrote to all of the staff in the court and community school settings. That is about 1.5 pages long, that explains the learning series, what the goals were, thanking them for their commitment to our students and the hard work they do every day, and explaining that once we get to the design phase with a plan, everyone will be involved. It will include and honor the strategic plan that they've already shaped. And it's exciting to think about what we can all accomplish together for our students. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions? No?
Looks like Hector has a
Oh,
question.
Mr. Camacho?
Thank you. It's been really helpful to see a little insight into the process that went into reaching that really thorough shared commitment. I think as we go on this process as a school of the County Office of Education, I'd love to stay informed around those community partners that you're working with. I love that I think you brought up the National Equity Project that you're working with, which is one with which I'm familiar. I think what I'm getting at ultimately is, and at times it's difficult to be very upfront about this, but it's the reality of our county. We are working in a county of significant white leadership in a student body that is significantly Black and brown. And so as we think about our partners in this work going forward, or as you think about the partners going forward, really remembering who comes to the table in terms of community partnership and what not authority, that's the wrong word, but what credibility that they come with the students that they're intending to serve. And I think that this office has always been mindful of that, of who is working with our students and what is their motivation and how do they really engage community. So I'm so glad that you're going to continue to engage other partners in this work. And I just, as a board member, would love to be kept in the loop about who those partners are and how they represent our community. I also love that part of the design phase is going to include more voices, including hopefully the students themselves and the parents that of the students that we serve. So I know these are all things that you're probably thinking of, but those are things that are of particular interest to me as we continue to go forward and hear about the progress that's being made over time.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Ms. Benini?
So I just want to express my appreciation for the update. I feel like, as we're on the cusp of removing the closure date for the end of next school year and the anticipated formation of the board's ad hoc committee for Gateway, I really hope that it will be a process where we are involved and that we understand what's going on going forward, as well as other leaders in our sphere, including the board trustees for the districts. I think including more voices at the outset, to me, seems better because it helps you get on a better path. It always seems like, okay, we're planning and we're going to let you know, and then we'll engage. It just seems backwards to me. So I'm excited for the formation of the ad hoc. I'm glad that we are removing this sort of barrier that is hopefully, if we pass the resolution, that is a barrier to, like envisioning what Gateway could be in its current form. I don't think that should be off the table. It is a current functioning school. It is our school. And so some of my questions have to do with, the supports and the respect and the empathy that will be given to the school. It's been in a sort of limbo state for 2 years. And I don't feel like it's been supported enough in those years because we've been looking like, oh, we're going to close it. And what are we doing next? But what I really want to be part of this, and I just wanted to express, is the fact that there is a school there with teachers who care. And there is a school there that, from what I've seen when I visited and everything that I've heard and the people I've talked to, including students when we've been at events, is that it is a place where they feel like they can grow and be prepared to go to the next place, and that the teachers support them in those goals. And it's not 20th century, in my opinion. I feel like we have all those pieces there, and that one of the first considerations should be is how we infuse it with those things. And my real hope is that we do that starting now, parallel. So if this process continues and potentially there's some other school, maybe in addition to Gateway, I don't know, that is a different type of school that can serve students who don't qualify to go to Gateway, as we've had side discussions of like, what other types of schools does the board have authority over, and could we form? I feel like there is like an ongoing feedback loop that needs to happen, right? Where Gateway's there, it's functioning, there are beautiful students and staff and teachers there. And as we're learning, well, let's share it with them and let's include it, right? That's a vision that I think is helpful. And then we'll see what happens. But I think that if we have just this, okay, now we're planning, now we're designing, it still is out there somewhere that it's going to be not there, or it's going to be something totally different. And I don't agree right now sitting here that it isn't something that can be molded and modified and meet the needs of students. So it's not really a question, but I guess my question would be, is that the plan, is to sort of help it along on the way and give it those supports and then see what happens? Or is it like?
I believe I said that the current goal is to uplift the program for this year while we're going through the design, and we're going to let the design occur and let the plans evolve from there, which is how these kinds of things work. So
Okay,
people will be at the table, they will be able to express their opinions. But we will lead with the goal to accomplish our commitment statement.
and how do you plan to include the board?
I believe you will be picking a ad hoc subcommittee in August.
Mhm.
So we will work with the subcommittee to keep them informed. And then when it's time to, when the process starts happening, which it hasn't started yet, right? There is no process yet. That you will be included in engagement activities, report outs, tours. I'm not really sure because we haven't planned it yet. And that is the fact.
Okay, well, I would just posit that including the board in part of the planning would probably be a good idea.
So the school leaders will make the plans and then we will share that with the board. And then we will include all the stakeholders in the process.
Mr. Torres?
Yeah, I was going to echo the same thing about getting us involved because I would really much like to be present, especially addressing what Board Member Camacho said about the students that we're serving. Because even when I read Freedom Dreaming, I think of the historical context of the term freedom, and historically it's been for one particular group and not necessarily the group that we're serving. So just little things like that. And I would really love to be present, and a request if we could get the letter that you sent out to the staff, just so we're using the same language and there's a commonality there.
Yeah, I can share that.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Alvaro?
Thank you. I really do appreciate this. I have a very strong sense of deja vu, which I know that Mr. Ard and probably also Mr. Cannon will recognize why I do. You know, once upon a time, we had to look at our community schools, because at the time we had 4 scattered throughout the county. It wasn't working right, but we knew that we needed to continue to serve those students, and we knew that we had some things that were working right. And, you know, at the time we formed a subcommittee that I chaired, and I got a lot of stakeholders in from, like, I got police chiefs in from the areas that were referring kids. And some of the chiefs sent also, or brought also their school resource officers because they knew those kids. Formation was at the table. John Maltby came to the table. We had Rich Gordon from the Board of Supervisors came to the table. We just brought everybody to the table. And I said, you know, here's what I want to just envision for myself. We have this set of schools that are built out of a bunch of building blocks like you give to kids. The configuration isn't working, but the blocks are solid. So how do we take it apart and put it back together in a way that we don't lose the pieces that are working, and we put something together that's better? Gateway came out of that. The gateway that went up, that was inside Hillcrest at one time, that with a separate entrance and stuff. The community school idea that we had one central thing came out of that process. I mean, it wasn't me, it wasn't my ideas. Boys and Girls Club were at the table. I mean, we had people come up with great ideas, because what we tried to do was to say, who are the stakeholders who aren't the obvious stakeholders? And it was people like the school resource officers. They weren't the obvious stakeholders, but they knew what they were talking about. We also made sure that we got some of the kids involved, which was tough. But talking about the culture of low expectation, part of it, I believe, stemmed from, we'll figure out what's good for you and we'll tell you. And as soon as, which they were used to, they'd been hearing that since they were kindergartners. Once we said, we need help. You need to help us figure out what's good for you. And then we'll help you put it, and then we'll put it together. And we're not going to tell you, we're going to ask you. The whole conversation changed because we had, and I'm delighted to see, I'm going to get his name wrong, Nick
Jasso.
Nick Jasso, thank you, is there because he's exactly the right. Katie Bliss, of course, who's a rock star, but Nick Jasso, I mean, because he knows he's there. So I do have the concern that we make sure that the leaders include leaders from sort of like every tier and not just.
Yeah, we have so many community partners too, that are available to surround the village, let's just say, a lot of people in the village.
And as Ms. Benini said, and Mr. Torres just said, it was like, and us,
Yes.
because some of us have been inside juvenile hall more than most of those kids have. And Gateway is, I mean, it's not juvenile hall, but it's the same basic population concept. And so the idea that, that we can help, you know, it's not a matter of we need to be there keeping an eye on what's going on. We can help. And so please, I know we're going to have a subcommittee, but I want to make sure the subcommittee is not just sort of like gets the reports and comes back to the board. We can help.
Yeah.
So use us. Thank you.
Mr. Cannon, did you have anything you wanted to say? Okay. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you very much. It looks like we're marching on.
Yep.
And we are going to form our ad hoc committee in August. So I want everybody to be thinking about that. And thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Item 6B, the board will discuss and potentially act on resolution number 23-25, rescinding Gateway Community Schools June 30th, 2024 closure date. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public? Are there, yes?
We do have one hand.
Okay.
Misty Sega. Misty, you're free to talk.
Good evening. My name is Misty Sego. I'm a teacher at Gateway. And I just want to say everything you just said touched me, members of the board. Thank you for supporting Gateway. And it has been difficult the past couple of years having that date weighing upon us. There is an overall feeling of not being supported by some with that date in place. With that date removed, I think that any kind of reimagining, if you will, any kind of building, speaking to what Ms. Alvaro was saying, taking the good that is definitely there and building upon it is possible. It's definitely possible without that date. So I just appreciate y'all moving forward with that. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the board or questions? Okay, with that, is there a motion to approve resolution number 23-25, rescinding Gateway Community Schools June 30th, 2024 closure date? Yes, Ms. Fanini?
We were in public comments. I wasn't, and then you said board, so I did want to make a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I just wanted to say that in the resolution, similar to our prior conversation about the current process, the last whereas in the resolution was reflective of comments heard from many board members, right? In terms of how we want to be involved and how we want to see things proceed. So I do want to pass it, but I'd like to read that clause so the public can hear it. Those who can't see it for whatever reason, don't have our agenda in front of
okay.
them, because I think it's really important. So there are three whereases just outlining the initial closure and the proposed extension for a year, and then the decision to extend to the June 30th, 24 date, which we're now rescinding. And then the final whereas reads, whereas the board has expressed its priority, 1, to continue to serve students at Gateway as a school of the board. 2, to include all San Mateo County High School and unified districts in any continuing process and discussions concerning any future proposed changes to Gateway's program. And 3, for the board to be included in any continuing process and discussions concerning any future proposed changes to Gateway's program and in the broader community stakeholder engagement on this matter by and through the participation of the board's Gateway Ad Hoc Committee when it is formed. So with that, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the resolution.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to approve resolution number 23-25 made by Ms. Benini and a second by Mr. Torres. Is there any further discussion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Alvaro,
Aye.
Ms. Benini,
Aye.
Mr. Camacho,
Aye.
Mr. Cannon,
Aye.
Mr. Torres,
Aye.
Ms. Gerard.
Aye. The motion passes with unanimous vote, and the resolution number 23-25 has been approved. Item 6C, Patricia Love, Executive Director, Strategy and Communications, will provide an update on the implementation of the Gamut Policy Plus service for the San Mateo County Office of Education. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public? Ms. Love?
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Gerard, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. I am here just to provide a little update on the Gamut Policy Plus project and what we're expecting to do and answer any questions you may have. Next slide. Oh, I have it. Great. So Gamut is live. As you know, on the 14th of June, you adopted all the policies. They have since been posted on the Gamut site. There's a link in your packet to them. This is what the page looks like on the Gamut site. You can link to it from the SMCOE webpage. That page on one of your board pages, it's board policies and superintendent policies. And it includes all of the policy, bylaws, regulations, and related documents that you approved and the superintendent policies that were approved. And the documents on the site are searchable, and they're also available in more than 130 languages. So those are two big features that we were not able to accomplish with the way we had the policies before. So that's pretty exciting. So a little bit on the process for updating the policies going forward. As we have mentioned, there have been updates already to the board policies. And so we need to adopt those, that you need to adopt those. And so here's a little bit of the process for getting there. The staff will review the updates, which may include new board policies, bylaws, exhibits, and any existing edits to existing policies, bylaws, and exhibits. And we have just set up a system that we will use sort of the same staff, the core cabinet, to review the policies that come in the updates, kind of look to see if they have any recommendations on should we keep them, should we edit them, and then those will come back to you. But we did just set that up recently. Then the staff will provide board policy subcommittee with recommendations, which might include a variety of things like adopt or recommend or ignore. And then the board policy subcommittee with the superintendent can review those recommendations and then prepare recommendations for the board. And we also spoke about, it would be great to get a process in place where when the packet's released, we have a little time to look at it. The subcommittee, the internal subcommittee looks at it, and then the board subcommittee. So it's almost like clockwork. and then it goes to the board. So we'll get that set up so that you have a kind of a clear process for that. And then we'll make any of the edits and prepare the documents for board consideration. We'll use probably the similar table that we used when you adopted previously that listed sort of here's what they are and here's the recommendation. We wouldn't really take the whole packet of all the suggested, all the policies to the full board. I think just the ones that you want to act on. So the subcommittee would act on. And then you would just conduct your first and second readings and act on them. So that's sort of the plan for the board policies and board documents. And the next one is the superintendent policies, pretty much the same process we would use. Except when it came to the subcommittee, we'd probably just take the policies and let you know, here's the policies, here's the plan for the superintendent policies. And then the whole board would receive a report on what the recommendation of the subcommittee was with respect, what the superintendent recommendations are. So that was a big part. I know when you were planning was how were you kept informed as a board? So that will be part of the process. It's just keeping you informed of what's happening in the superintendent policies. And then next steps. So when I made these, I wasn't as familiar with Gammon as I am now. You don't really need to have an account to get in there because there's not that much you can do, but we will, if you don't have one, we'll set you up with one. That's not a problem, but you don't need them to review the policy and approve the updates. We will look at the March and June updates. We've already started that. A lot of the March updates, I think we already captured when you did the initial one. So that's like a huge time saver. And then the June ones we'll look at and bring those back. And then the goal is to get these to you for first reading in August, if that works with everyone's schedules, but we'll see what happens with that. And that's it. Any questions on the process?
Are there any questions? It doesn't look like it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate the update. Item 6D is superintendent's comments. Superintendent McGee, do you have any comments to share?
Just a very few brief comments. One is that the Big Lift is implementing right now its Inspiring Summers program. There are 914 children involved across the county in Inspiring Summers. I was able to visit last week, I think, at Curiosity. They did a field trip, so that was fun to go see the kids. And then today I went out to Pescadero Elementary to view their Bliss program there. And they have 62 children participating in the Big Lift Inspiring Summers in La Honda Pescadero. So it's been a successful summer. And I think I forwarded to you the most recent communication about the Big Lift strategic planning changes that are coming. And I will keep you updated as those things play out. One other quick thing, in September at the California County Boards of Education Conference, the county office will be doing a joint presentation with the Monterey County Office of Education on our Big Five protocols. I think I've also shared with you that Monterey County has adopted our Big Five protocols and we're supporting them in that adoption. There are other counties and other districts across the state interested, so this may become a statewide kind of effort that we provide. And today we received acceptance that we will also be presenting the Big Five presentation at CSBA in December. We'll be presenting on Friday morning, again in collaboration with Monterey County. So we'll get some good traction on that presentation. A whole bunch of birthdays coming up in the county office here, and someone on the board as well. So before our next meeting, which is August 23rd. So Chris Schaus will celebrate her birthday on July 25th. Patricia Love on August 2nd. And Patricia shares a birthday apparently with Dr. Mary Young, who's also an August 2nd birthday. And then President Gerard finishes the birthday group on August 10th with your birthday. So happy birthday to everybody. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. And happy birthday, everybody who has birthdays from now through the 23rd. Item 7A, the board will move to closed session to hear interdistrict attendance appeal 23-2 filed on behalf of a student currently residing in the Palo Alto Unified School District, but requesting to attend school in the Portola Valley School District. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public?
May session and a few people online who will be available to answer questions about those.
Okay.
So just so that you know, we're going to close the meeting down remotely now. Is that how we do it?
Yeah.
It'll stay open, but there won't be any activity online. And when the board is ready to come out of closed session, we'll open that back up. So
Okay.
just want those people to know.
Okay, thank you. The board has now moved back into open session. And item 8A is the board will report on action taken in closed session. For interdistrict attendance appeal 23-2, the board voted to approve the appeal by a unanimous vote. Item 9A, the Workforce Housing Subcommittee will provide an update on recent discussions. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public? Superintendent McGee, would you like to provide an introductory remarks?
Yes, thank you, President Gerard. So in your board packet, there's a very extensive cover memo. Several documents were forwarded by Armando Sanchez, Executive Director of HART, for our use, and I kind of synthesized the many different pieces into this one cover memo, which kind of takes you through each of the aspects of the partnership and the project. And then Armando also provided this FAQ, which is Exhibit A, which is really helpful, I think, if you have the particular questions that have come up so far. So we're trying to answer what can be really some complicated material in simple ways. And then one other thing I want to draw your attention to is that the Workforce Housing Subcommittee met on Friday, and Board Member Torres pulled down this document, which is the county income limits, and you all have this in your packet. So when we talk about AMI and what is low income, it does provide some idea of what those numbers are for different family sizes, just so you have a reference if that comes up. And so Armando is here to answer questions as they come up in the board's discussion. And then I'll hand it back over to the board members for the report out on the subcommittee meeting.
Hector, I emailed you the 2023 income limits, just in case if you didn't have it or get it. I just emailed it to you before, so you can look at that. We met to discuss like parameters and criteria of the areas that we were looking for, which can be outlined in the summary of what was given. And then we talked about realistically what it looks like, because I think we were under, well, for me, initially the impression of who we were going to able to serve initially. And just understanding that our goal in doing that is not going to be for a while, but I am 100% in support of this initiative that we're doing, because we're not going to be able to do it right away, but we'll be able to do it eventually.
I think what you might also be referring to is the fact that we did look on Friday at rent, what rents are for like a 1-bedroom apartment in San Mateo county, maybe in some of a building that, might be a target for you, Armando, and the rents were very high and we were pretty astounded for like studio apartments and one bedrooms at like $3,800, $4,200 a month rents. So I think, Hugo, what you're referring to is that the rents are going to be high and we may only be able to start at maybe, I think you decided that if we could start at 10% below AMI was a marker that we thought we could start with. And that would be something that would be in the MOU if the rest of the board agrees. And so to Hugo's point, it's a high rent and it's going to be a $4,000 a month rent. You're going to save $400. So your rent's still going to be $3,600. So it's going to have to be education workforce that can afford that level of rent, or for roommates that might be able to share costs.
I want to add a little bit to that as well, because our conversation, when we saw that factor, like, oh, it would be, one of the options was to have it be 5%, then it was 10%, and then it was, and then we looked at the rents, and my question really was, wow, is this even feasible for any of our workforce, to be honest? And so I think one of the asks is to definitely look at pay scales across the county to see who it's actually feasible for, even from the outset, and then sort of talk about the messaging around that, because we have this overlay of, okay, we want to use the equity rubric and we want to serve those in need. And really the message, I think you said this, Nancy, and I was like trying to think of what Delaney Easton always says about, your work now is a gift to the future or something like that, because it's really a long game where we're actually, before we were like, oh, it's going to be teachers and then staff will be later. And it's really looking more like it's going to be administrators and then teachers and then staff. Maybe that's one scenario. And so I just think that might be the reality, and we're going to need to know that to be able to message it. Because it might not be, when we're talking about what's most equitable to get people into housing, it might not be that right away. Like, it might not seem logical, but we're gonna have to try to figure out how to message it. And in the long run, I think it's great. But I think that we need to know a little bit more about that too, just so that we know how to message it.
Hector, you had your hand up. Did you take it down?
I took it down. I'll just say it because I think Trustee Bonini brought up the great point of it is a long game. My comment was going to be around, I really believe that federal assistance is going to be necessary for this project to be successful long-term. I think we have a representative that is friendly to education, but I think they should be aware of what we're thinking and what we're encountering. And so if we can engage with Congressman Mullen's office around what this is actually turning out to look like, because I do think this is a great opportunity to look at how we can think differently about supporting educators, and the federal government can play a role in that.
Okay. I wanted to raise one other issue, because we did talk about some of the issues you raised, Susan, around who can access it depending on where it is. And we did talk about like the parameters that are on the list, like where it might be. And there is that concept. We talked about it briefly at the last meeting, or it was discussed around once we have equity and we're able to sort of allocate it to lower rents or to different beneficial, things. If there are districts who are taking, like, for instance, a slight hit on the property tax side, and they really they're not using this resource, a district perhaps that already has its own housing plan, or one that is very affluent and doesn't have that need, that there's a lot of decision points along the way where we could say, okay, we're hearing this, or this is an impact. How could we possibly take part of that equity and then supplement it to places where there's a concern? So, that was part of the conversation. Your point was a little a little different. We didn't think that the issue of having housing, probably with the type of housing they're looking for, it probably won't end up being on the coast side, but right, it would still be a commute. So we talked about all of that too. I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Ms.
do.
Alfaro?
I had a question. I'm gonna shoot this one to Mr. Baltima. I'm looking at the I can't find a page number. There's no page numbers on here, but it's talking about property tax revenue and how much the districts will lose. So it says this, the county will lose about 195,000. I know that's an approximation. My question is, can that come out of the quote unquote excess property tax that we're being penalized for having?
Not as I currently understand it, no. Now, it doesn't mean we can't have a conversation and see if we can't do something maybe through our legislators to see if there is maybe some education code that could be drafted or some kind of a bill that might allow that. It makes a lot of sense to me. But currently, no, we would not be able to take that from the excess property tax calculation.
It just seems that if we're doing something positive toward workforce housing, we're doing something positive toward teacher housing, and we're taking a tax hit because of it, there should be some offset to this excess property tax nonsense that we have to put up with. And I don't know, the other person, I heard what Mr. Camacho said about Congressman Mullen. It's a great idea. But the other one is Senator Becker has been pushing for, he just made an announcement today or yesterday about the potential for the state buying one of the old nurseries on the coast, the old Rose City nursery, which is just south of Half Moon Bay proper. It's kind of across from Ocean Colony there, and turning that into farm labor housing. So he's making a lot of noise about specifically farm labor housing, but labor housing in general. So it would seem that it might be beneficial to perhaps talk to him about some state policy stuff, as well as talking to Congressman Mullen about federal policy stuff.
Ms. Bonini.
I just wanted to make one comment about the excess property taxes. We raised it in our initial meeting. And my question, and trying to analyze it was, well, if overall there are fewer property taxes, which coming from this source, maybe overall it rises, so we're still have a lot of excess, but theoretically, if it's a big impact and there are fewer being collected, maybe it ends up inherently being fewer that we have to give back, right? Because they might be linked, but there might be some other extraneous, tax that raises it all up and we still have to give away a lot. But that was my initial thinking about it, like, oh, maybe it's like a seesaw, but I don't really think it'll work that way, but it was a consideration.
Yeah, I have a feeling that if, the state has an option, it will not count and we'll still have to give the rest of it back. But that's just my cynical point of view.
But even if your theory would be correct, Board Member Bonini, the loss of property tax per year is minimal. And in the amount we return, I don't even think it would be like a nickel, it would look like a nickel in the big number that we're handing back $38 million. And we're talking about a couple of hundred, I don't know. So even if it was less, I don't think we'd notice. I just think we'd say that. Armando, do you want to kind of speak to some of this? I know that you're tracking the conversation. So.
Yes, thank you. And good evening, President Gerard and board members. And thank you, Nancy, as well for this opportunity again. I do want to address, as your comments, I really am, I can't say enough that I'm extremely happy that you understand how this is a long game. Many people that we frequently speak to do not understand that, it's not an immediate cure-all. It is something that improves and continues to improve the further you go out in time. So I really appreciate that you understand that. As I said, many don't. And, in terms of the affordability levels, do keep in mind that while it is absolutely true that the discounts are not great if you spread the benefit across all units, but to use a very simple example, if we had 10 units and each one got 100 off, then there's not much of a discount. But if you focus it on a few units, say 3 or something like that, then the discount could be a lot greater. You will get down to the levels of teachers in the first year, maybe not staff, but perhaps a few staff, because we're talking about big projects. So it is a matter of distribution of the rent benefits. So like I said, you could have a couple of educators or not a couple, a good number of educators in the building, and the rest, we rent it to the general public or other taxing agency employees who have much higher salaries, and those all help subsidize the lower rents for educators. So do keep in mind that that's going to be a decision for you to make as how that benefit is allocated, to ensure you do have some lower some lower paid employees able to occupy immediately, and that number will grow over time. So I do want to emphasize that point. And other than that, any other questions you have? I have nothing else to add unless you have further questions.
Can the members of the subcommittee just share with the full board the conversation about the location of what the preferences were for where that building might be located if you were looking, Armando, for a building? The subcommittee did discuss that with some general guidance.
Yes, so we wanted to make sure that it was family focused, that it was easily accessible to transportation and other areas of need for if there were families, and like just a central location that they could easily get to by car or other means.
And I think central in the county as well. So not so much on the edges of the south, the coast, or the north, but more edging into the middle of the county.
Okay.
Which is probably matches up with where you're building, where you're thinking the buildings are anyway.
It does.
Yeah.
One other aspect I think is important is there are some districts that are currently maybe trying to work on some of their own housing projects. And so it might be good to talk to those districts. That would be like Redwood City and Ravenswood.
Well, I mean, I think these
Pacifica.
projects are quite a few years. I'm not really sure what their timelines are. But
Yeah.
they have the effort is started. Let's just say that. So Redwood City, Pacifica.
Yeah, Pacific is entitled. Of course, they've got the issue of financing. So, I mean, it's they're moving along.
And
Jefferson
I
L.
think Ravenswood has definite plans to do some housing. But I think also when we keep in mind that a single building, we might have 10 units, you think, or 20 units, Armando, to start with. I don't really know what you predict.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's really difficult to give you an estimate right now because we don't know a specific building. It could be a large building that we managed to get at a decent price, so we would have way more units available than if we found a building that didn't initially have great potential for rents, but down the line, we know it will be even more units. So it's really difficult to say it, but I think, if we find a building with, say, 150 units, I think it'll be much more than 10 units. I think, probably a third, probably a quarter of the units would have some level of affordability that would be open to educators. And as you mentioned earlier, because we're able to do roommate situations, I think we'll be able to help a lot of those younger employees who are more willing to be in roommate situations without, having them pay an amazing amount of money to share an apartment with someone else.
Yeah, and so to summarize the next steps, we'll continue to gather information and follow up on the questions that the board has and share out through superintendent memos to you. I think the goal is to have an MOU ready by the sometime after the next board meeting, which would be August 23rd. And potentially at the August 23rd board meeting, there would be a resolution by which the board would take action for participation in the project and agreeing to the public benefit strategy that we would prefer, which I think would be to own the building at the end of the 30 years. And do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. And so our goal then would be after August 23rd, the MOU would be ready to go. And then Armando, I'm not sure about the timing. Would you go look for a building at that point, or do you need the approval of the HART board before you go look for a building?
So, the HART board has approved the program, and you would, in essence, you would also be approving the program, and both the HART board and your office, Supervisor McKee, would have to approve each individual, the building we would acquire. So to answer the question again is yes, the HART board would have to authorize the specific building we target to purchase. And your office would also have to say, yes, we like that building too. Let's buy that building. So both bodies essentially, well, not, if you have the authority already, but both entities will have to approve the building. Yeah, obviously, as well as, the RBC who would represent the bondholders. Every party has to say, yes, this makes sense. And then if one party doesn't believe it's a good situation, then, we would walk away from that potential one, is the way it would work.
So once the MOU is signed, then you are free to go look for the buildings themselves.
Exactly.
And then if you
That
find
would be the
something, you
case.
bring it back to the partners, and then we decide from there.
Exactly.
Okay. Is that clear to everybody? Okay. And so I think as the project would evolve, once the building was purchased and we were moving forward, I think in the early years, setting up the priorities for who would have the units would be probably pretty simple, because the rents would still be fairly high. And then we can learn kind of how it works and get a groove on our end. And then with each passing year, then have a plan for the next year ahead. And we do have an equity rubric here at the county office, which we were planning to potentially bring to the August 23rd meeting as well and demonstrate it for the board so you can kind of see it as a tool. And that would be a tool that we would just use in our criteria and our decision making going forward.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, well, there's no action to be taken on this item right now. Thank you for the report. And thank you for joining us this evening. We appreciate you being here and answering questions. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Item 9B, the board will suggest topics for future board agendas. Would any board members like to discuss agenda priorities and timelines for topics? Ms. Panini?
So I have a question. It's actually for trustee Camacho. In the last version I had of the future agenda items, there was an item that you had requested regarding student outcomes and board governance model around student outcomes, and I just didn't see it on the list in our current agenda. So I was just wondering if it was.
It's on the list.
It's here.
Was it?
It's under pending agenda topics,
It's the second one.
second bullet.
Oh, you know what? I actually thought that was a different one. So I see it there now. So thank you for the correction. Okay, so with that, I have another question. So I was just reviewing them and there's two that need to be, obviously, we've talked about the agenda or having an agenda item in August for the ad hoc committee for Gateway. So it's not on here, but I just want to re-request it for August. And then the one I think I didn't see, but I'm going to double check is, oh, maybe it is there. Yes. So the one that I'd like to prioritize, is getting in place a board governance calendar in the next couple of months, because I really want that to be in place before 2024. I think that's something that we would benefit from for planning and just so we can be mindful of what we do request. I think that will help everyone. And I'm just glad to see everything else is still here. It would be great to have an update on the timeline when things will happen. I assume school visits when there's school. And then of course we'll have our Good Beginnings workshop. And yeah, I think that's it.
Does anyone else have anything to add to this? Mr. Camacho, we do have you down here too for student outcomes, focused board governance model as well. And Superintendent McGee, we talked about that. Did we talk about that for September? Was that? when
It did,
we-
I mean, it kind of depends on what happens with the Good Beginnings workshop and when that gets scheduled.
Okay,
So these are all the items for, say, between now and October.
okay, all right. Ms. Panini.
Is the Good Beginnings workshop not scheduled for September 20th?
I have requested that date and I have yet to get a confirmation from them.
Oh, I thought you had that one confirmed.
We had a bunch of dates that they had on their list. And I sent in the September 20th request last week, but I never heard back from them. So I sent them another request this week, trying to get a confirmation. Like I said to you, President Gerard, fingers and toes crossed that they have it available still.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Item 9C, board members will comment. And I'm going to start with Mr. Camacho.
I don't, I missed my chair. I don't think I have any. I don't think I have any for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cannon.
Board President Gerard, can I just enter?
Yes.
Executive Director Love just let me know that CSBA got back to us tonight and confirmed for the 20th.
Oh, great.
So everybody can breathe a sigh of relief. I'm going to go have a little beverage.
Okay.
That has been a very difficult thing to get over the finish line.
Can I
Yes, you may.
have my turn back? It did occur to me, there is something in the works going on, and that is the Latino Heritage Month speaker series is in planning process right now. There's a group of school board members and superintendents throughout the county who have been working on this. There'll be a series of 4 dates in September and October. I'll get those dates to Superintendent McGee just so that you can have them on their calendar. My understanding is they will all be hosted at the San Mateo Performing Arts Center. So we're excited for that. More details to follow, but I did want to get that on your radar. And Mr. Torres is also on that planning committee. So happy to have him there.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Cannon?
There are so many things. There are so many things happening that I'm excited about and pleased about. And number one, I think, is the foster student item that the superintendent included in her last newsletter about how well we've done in signing our foster students up for aid. Great, great thing. The big lift, gosh, to have that on such solid ground is very encouraging. I remember the years when funding was so questionable, but it sounds like we're really on the right track. I just think we're in great shape with board policies, the housing thing moving along, the social media efforts, the progress we're making on Gateway. There are just so many things to be excited about and encouraged about. And I'm really pleased for all that. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a nice list. Ms. Alvaro?
Thank you. So I was able to attend the budget workshop from Capital Advisors last week. And there's a whole lot, which I definitely don't want to go into, and I'm sure the experts were sitting right there listening to it. But there were a couple of things I found really interesting that just sort of to put them on our radar. There's this new odd thing called a non-stability rate, which will take into account kids with chronic absences and expulsions as a factor in the LCFF equity multiplier. Might come up to, they said, threw out some numbers of maybe $900 per student in districts that qualified for that. And it must be used, this is what interested me, it must be used for evidence-based uses to improve outcomes for those particular kids. So I thought that was interesting. That wasn't something I've heard before. What I have heard before, and I'm hearing it again, is there's a new LCAP template, and Ms. Dardanelle's gone because she'd be crawling underneath the table right now, and they're adding more requirements. So that's exciting because we keep asking them to trim it down and they keep saying, well, maybe we'll just add a few thousand more things. There will be some new funding and accountability requirements for court and community schools. So that's going to be interesting as we move forward with, especially with Gateway, and obviously with Hillcrest and Camp Kemp. The Arts Block grant, once again, we get the money, we get the headlines, yeah, all this money for the arts and education, and then they quietly are cutting back 15% of it. They're taking 50% of it back. So, but they're not publicizing that. So it's just like for that big chunk of money we supposedly got for arts, we're losing some of it. No big surprise. They've added one extra year on charter renewals because of the delays with COVID and data collection. And they did, as we've probably all seen with the CSBA newsletters, tightened up the rules for charter appeals to the State Board of Ed because now they have to show abuse of discretion from both the local district and the county office before the state board can say, oh, we're just going to send it back, because we've watched them do that. And then on the local front, again, it was either yesterday or today, our Board of Supervisors approved a guaranteed income program for foster youth who are aging out of the system to give them, I think it's 18 to 22. So that'd be, let's say 4 years of, it is, they're not going to get rich on it, but they're also not going to land on the streets. They're going to have some money to pay the rent or put food in their stomachs or, have a working cell phone so they can apply for jobs. So that to me is just an extraordinarily big step for a lot of what we've been advocating for foster youth for a very long time. Kids who age out of the system, they just you're out, you're gone. And they don't have any safety nets, a lot of them. So that's why they're in the foster youth system, because they don't have any safety nets. So I was excited to see that. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Torres.
Yes, last week I got to meet the artist Pedro Rivas, and he's the one, the artist leading the mural outside, and I got to meet some of the students and the teachers who were a part of that. Patricia, Superintendent McGee, and I were able to contribute some of our skills to outlining butterflies. I think we did a great job. I know he fixed it up after we left, but we can still claim that as our victory. But it's coming along beautifully, and the two girls that were there from the very beginning, and they approached me so happily to talk about the mural, and they were just so excited, and it was so great to see them just light up and see students who were part of the art therapy group and how that has helped them. And the artist Pedro is doing a lot of great things in the community, so a special shout out to him.
Thank you. Ms. Panini.
Thanks. I have I have three things. The first one is on August 1st, in the evening, which is a Tuesday, we are having the very first Youth Services Committee of the Behavioral Health Commission's pathways mapping. And thank you to Superintendent McGee for helping us have a home to do this. And thank you for attending. We hope to have about 35 key selected leaders around mental health and also stakeholders and parents who've experienced the system, so we can start building this model for the front of stage, as Frida, who is our chair for that committee, describes the experience of the families in getting through the pathways. And then our hope is that model of the facilitation and the information gathering is perfected. We can fine tune it after that, and then take it on the road, if you will, and go throughout the county in different places, in different languages, in different areas, so we can gather even more information. So that's a big project for the Behavioral Health Commission, and it will begin soon. So that's exciting. My second thing is the Commission on Disabilities is having their annual signature event, which is the Inclusion Festival. And yes, it's coming up next week, Thursday, the 27th. There are flyers. They're pretty simple. I can share them if you have not seen them, if you want to share them forward. It's all day, well, most of the day, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Red Morton Park in Redwood City. And it is, there's lunch provided. It's not a barbecue this year, it's boxes, but still lunch. And it's also Disability Pride Month, and there'll be, I don't know, probably close to 100 community organizations doing tabling, and there'll be entertainment, and we have an MC who is our former Disabilities Commission staff liaison. So that's exciting. So that's happening. And then lastly, kind of as a pair on to the announcement that there's going to be a presentation at the CSBA conference in December through the county office, or maybe there's one or two. I'm also going to be on a panel that was approved, and it is called Preparing for a Post-Pandemic Future, Leveraging Mental Health Services to Nurture Student Wellness. And I'll be on this panel. Sorry, I put it in here so I could give you more information. I was asked by a friend of mine who is an attorney at Burke Williams Sorensen, John Ye, to join, and it'll be with Dr. Geisick, who's superintendent in Saratoga Union School District, a board member from their district, Melissa Stennis, and then another one of their attorneys who is also has a PhD in psychology, Mr. Jack Lipton. So so that's going to be fun. And it's also on, I think it's also on Friday morning. So we might be competing. But anyway, that's all.
Thank you very much. I don't have a whole lot to report tonight. Everybody has done a great job. I was also on the budget workshop call, and Susan did a beautiful job of recapping all the important stuff. So thank you, Susan, very much. And it was very interesting. I also read today where the feds are trying to cut education. And that was very disturbing. So, well, yeah, and it was special education. And we all know where we are on that anyway. So it was a very disturbing article. Anyway, with that, I just want to again thank everyone for this evening. We had a lot of extensive reports with a lot of things that need to be done coming up. Everybody's going to be busy, and it looks like we're going to also have hopefully a lot of exciting things to look forward to. So with that, happy birthday again to everybody that has late July and August birthdays. And our next regular meeting will take place on Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023 at 7 p.m. And this meeting is adjourned. Bye, Hector.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.